You ever heard of San Isidro de las Cruces? No? That's the thing. No one has. Not anymore. Not on maps, not in records, not in the dusty books of Yucatan's regional archives. Type the name on your phone, and you'll get nothing. Not even a pin drop. Just an eerie silence from your screen, like it's trying to remember something that was erased. But if you ask the older folks in nearby villages, those who still sit outside their crumbling adobe homes with thick coffee and old cigarettes, they'll pause for a second. Their fingers will stop tapping, their faces will go still, and then, softly, almost too quietly to hear, they'll say it. San Isidro de las Cruces. It was real. We remember. Then, just as quickly, they'll look away and mumble the same warning. Don't ask too much. The wind still listens. They say San Isidro was a quiet place. Nothing special, really. A handful of houses with chipped paint. A small chapel with a cracked bell tower, and a marketplace that smelled of tortillas and drying chili. The village sat nestled at the edge of the jungle, where the trees were always dry, but the shadows always felt too cold. There were no hotels, no bus stops, not even cell signal. Just the kind of place time forgot, and the people didn't mind being forgotten. But then, one morning, it was just gone. Not burnt down, not flooded, not overgrown. Gone. Like the earth had opened up and whispered, "Shh," and the whole village had vanished into silence. The road that led to it? Still there mostly. Faded tire tracks, a worn wooden signpost now blank. But if you follow it, you won't find ruins. You won't find rubble. Just a clearing that shouldn't be there, where even the birds don't land and the trees lean away as if afraid. Julio, a farmer from the next village over, swore he saw it happen, or at least saw the beginning of it. He'd gone to the edge of his field that morning, early, when the air was still cool and the mist hung low. He said he looked toward the hills where San Isidro sat, and it was there. He could see the bell tower poking out from behind the trees. But in less than 10 minutes, a strange fog rolled in, thick and slow and unnatural. When it cleared, there was nothing. No tower, no village, just emptiness. He ran into town, shouting, telling everyone what he saw. At first, no one believed him, but by midday, people started talking. "I tried calling my cousin," said one man. No answer. "The delivery truck never came," said another. By nightfall, 5 men rode out to check. They came back pale, sweating, saying, "It's gone, the whole damn place." And then came the name, La Bruja del Viento. It wasn't the first time people had spoken her name, but it was the first time in decades anyone said it without laughing. Older folks remembered the stories, how she was once a healer in San Isidro, a curandera who knew too much. They said she could speak to storms, bend the smoke from her incense like fingers, whisper in tongues no one taught her. Her real name was gone with time, but the legend stayed. A woman with long white hair and a voice that echoed like wind through the trees. Kind to the sick, but cruel to the proud. The story went that she lived just outside the village, past the last row of crops, in a crooked little hut made of palm leaves and stone. But something happened. No one agrees on what. Some say the priest tried to drive her out, said she was ungodly. Others say a girl died in her care, and the villagers blamed her. Maybe both. All that's known is one day, they came with torches. They burned her hut, her books, her herbs. They say she stood in the flames and didn't scream, just stared at them with eyes full of smoke. And when the wind picked up, she was gone. After that, strange things happened. The wind in San Isidro changed. It started blowing in spirals, whispering through cracks, howling at windows that used to stay quiet. At night, people heard breathing that wasn't theirs. The priest grew sick. A boy vanished. A cow gave birth to a stillborn calf with human eyes. Eventually, things settled, or people stopped talking. Either way, the Witch of the Wind faded back into myth. Until now. Because what else could explain a village vanishing without a trace? Who else could erase a town from memory, from maps, from history itself? Locals began whispering again. She came back. She never left. Maybe San Isidro was hers. Maybe when they erased her, she waited, biding time like a storm cloud on the horizon. And when the last person who remembered her died, she took back what was hers. Tourists have tried to find it, of course. Ghost hunters, YouTubers, college kids with GoPros and ego. They drive that dusty road, park near the trees, and walk in with bravado and cheap flashlights. They always find the same thing, a weird silence. No birds, no bugs, just wind, constant, circling wind. Some say their cameras stop working. Others say they hear voices calling their names, even if no one ever told the jungle their names to begin with. The most famous case was a guy named Tomas from Merida. He uploaded a video titled "Finding the Lost Town of San Isidro, Real Bruja Caught on Camera." The footage is shaky, mostly trees. At one point, he stops, says he sees something in the distance, a small structure, like a bell tower. He walks toward it, laughing nervously. The last frame of the video is his face turning suddenly serious, then static. Tomas hasn't been seen since. The video's still up, with comments like "fake" and "too real, bro." His family filed a missing persons report. Police searched the area, found nothing, not even a footprint. Still think San Isidro was never real? People can argue all day. But sometimes, what's scarier than what you see is what's been made invisible, what's been taken. And in the empty wind of Yucatán, if you stand still and listen hard enough, you might just hear a name being carried on the breeze. Not spoken, not shouted, just breathed, like a curse slipping through the leaves. La Bruja del Viento. And maybe, just maybe, she's not done yet. At first, no one thought much of it. It was just wind, after all. The Yucatán gets its share of hot breezes and jungle gusts, especially after dusk. But this one felt different. It wasn't loud or wild. It didn't howl or tear through the trees. No, this wind was quiet, but sharp. The kind that slipped under doorways, coiled around your ankles, and crept into your ears like it had something to say. It whistled, but not with any rhythm. More like syllables, half words, almost a whisper. People started noticing it when the nights got too quiet. You don't realize how alive a place is until the noise disappears. The crickets, the frogs, the soft chirps and distant calls that fill the jungle after dark. They all just stopped. First, it was the chickens. They wouldn't cluck after sundown. Then the dogs started growling at corners of empty rooms, refusing to go outside. Even the monkeys in the trees, always screaming and swinging around, just went still. It wasn't just the silence. It was what came with it. A smell started drifting in. It wasn't strong, just subtle enough to be unsettling. Like dried herbs and wet bones. Not rotting, not fresh, just ancient. Like something left too long in a forgotten tomb. People would sniff the air and look around, confused. They'd check their kitchens, their cellars, their animals, but nothing explained it. And it always came at the same time, just after the sun dipped below the trees, when the last bit of golden light vanished from the dirt paths. Then people began to talk, in whispers at first, as if speaking too loudly would bring attention. "Did you hear that?" they'd ask their neighbors. "Last night, something in the wind." Some thought it was just the jungle playing tricks. Others began locking their windows, not because of thieves, but because they didn't want the air getting in. There was a boy, Mateo, only 10 years old. He was one of the first to say it out loud. One morning, he told his mother, "I think the wind is breathing." She laughed nervously, brushing it off. "You had a bad dream," she said. "Too many scary stories." But he insisted, said he heard it by the window, just before he fell asleep. A soft breathing, not like an animal, not like a person sleeping, but something bigger, slower. He said it felt like someone was just standing there, watching, waiting. That same week, several people started hearing things too. They wouldn't always describe it as breathing. Some said it was like someone humming in the distance, just outside the walls. Others said it felt like the air itself was pressing in, heavy and humming in their ears. It didn't matter if you closed the windows, it still found a way in. One woman, Lucia, lived alone near the edge of town. She was tough. Everyone knew her as the no-nonsense type who used to scare off stray dogs with just a glare. But she came running into the church one morning, barefoot, shaking. Said she heard something call her name, not shout it, but murmur it, 3 times, just outside her door. She opened it, expecting maybe a neighbor or a kid playing games, but there was nothing, just the wind. She slammed it shut, but the whisper didn't stop. It kept calling, softer now, right behind her. People said it was just the wind. Of course they did. What else could they say? That air had a voice? That something invisible was moving through their streets? But the more they ignored it, the more insistent it got. Candles wouldn't stay lit. Matches would spark but go out in the same breath. Clothes left outside overnight were found damp and twisted, like someone had wrung them out. Cornfields near the jungle started to bend, not like they were blown over, but as if something passed through them in a spiral, the plants all facing inward. And the smell, it got worse. Some days it came stronger. It was like rain that never fell. That metallic, earthy scent you get when a storm is coming. Only there were no clouds. Just that hot, hissing air. Some villagers said it made their teeth ache. Others started getting headaches, the kind that throbbed behind the eyes and made people dizzy. The doctor from the next town came once, after a family complained of sudden nausea. He found nothing wrong, medically speaking. Told them it was probably heat stroke or bad water. But even he looked uncomfortable when the breeze touched the back of his neck. He didn't stay long. A few elders began whispering again about La Bruja del Viento. Most of them had refused to say her name for years. They didn't want to stir the past, but this felt like her. They remembered the way she would speak to the air, how she never lit a fire, just let the wind blow through her hut, twisting her hair like smoke. Some of them claimed the smell was just like the oils she used to carry. Bitter herbs, dry roots, snake bones. The priest, Father Ronaldo, tried to calm everyone. He held an evening mass and told the people not to let fear take hold. The devil walks on fear, he said. Stand strong in faith. But even he looked over his shoulder more often than usual. That night, the wind blew harder than it had all week. Not loud, but thick, like breathing, like growling, like something being stirred awake. And then the dreams started. People across the village began having the same nightmare. Standing alone in the jungle, the trees creaking around them, and a voice calling their name. Not a scream, a soft, long whisper stretched out like a sigh. Come, it would say, come back. They'd wake up drenched in sweat, their bedsheets tangled. Some found dirt on their feet. Others swore they sleepwalked out to their doors without remembering. A few even found footprints outside, bare, long-toed, not human. One old man refused to sleep after that. Sat on his porch every night, shotgun in hand, rosary around his wrist. He died a week later in his chair. The shotgun never fired. No one could explain it. No one really wanted to. But everyone agreed on one thing. It wasn't just wind anymore. It was presence. It had weight, a voice, a rhythm. It moved with purpose, and it watched with patience. One girl, around 17, recorded the sound one night. Just pointed her phone toward the open window and let it capture the noise. In the morning, she played it back. Static at first. Then a low hiss. Then what sounded like breathing. Deep, raspy. And then a whisper right before the clip cut off. It said her name. She deleted the file and smashed the phone. She doesn't talk much now. By the end of that month, almost no one in San Isidro left their house after dark. The marketplace closed early. Kids were called home before sundown. People placed salt at their doors, lit candles they didn't believe in, and whispered prayers to saints they hadn't thought about in years. But nothing stopped the wind. It still came, still whispered, still watched, and if you were foolish or unlucky enough to lean your ear to the breeze, if you listened too long, you might hear something exhale. Not loudly, not angrily, just close, too close. And you'd feel, just for a second, that someone, something, was standing right behind you. Every town has that one old woman, the one people whisper about, the one kids dare each other to talk to, the one who always seems to know just a little too much. In San Isidro de las Cruces, that woman was Señora Dolores. She lived in a small, crumbling adobe house near the chapel, surrounded by dry herbs, broken rosaries, and glass jars filled with odd things no one could name. She had one good eye, sharp and black like obsidian. The other was clouded, milky white, staring off into a place no one else could see. She was always seen with a candle. Always. Even in the middle of the day, when the sun burned hot and shadows barely existed, she carried that stubby, half-melted candle in her wrinkled hand. Some said it was for her bad eye. Others thought it was just her way of remembering something or someone. But if you ever asked, she'd just smile, showing her crooked yellow teeth, and say, "The light keeps her away. The flame reminds her, I'm still here." People tolerated Dolores. They let her be. She didn't cause trouble. She didn't beg. She mostly muttered to herself, and sometimes to the air. Tourists found her fascinating, took pictures, offered coins. But the villagers, they avoided her, especially when the wind blew strange, because Dolores would whisper things then. Old things, names no one had spoken in decades, stories no one told anymore. She'd sit by her porch with her candle lit, rocking slowly in her chair, and say things like, "The trees remember her footsteps," or "She never left, you know, only hid inside the wind." Most brushed it off. The children called her La Loca, the mad woman. They'd run past her house, daring each other to knock on her door or steal her candle. A few even tried. One boy, Esteban, grabbed the candle once when Dolores went inside to fetch water. He laughed, thinking it was harmless, but before he could even reach the end of the street, a sharp gust of wind knocked him down hard, split his lip open on a stone. When he got up, he claimed he heard a woman laugh in his ear, soft, cruel, and cold. He never went near that house again. Dolores kept warning people. She'd show up at the market every few days, shuffle past the vendors, and whisper warnings under her breath. She's waiting for someone to remember her. You think forgetting makes you safe? Don't speak her name, or the wind will carry it back to her. The vendors rolled their eyes. Mothers tugged their children away. But some listened. At least, they remembered the warnings later, when it was too late. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the air grew heavy, Dolores did something she hadn't done in years. She walked into the chapel, her candle still burning, her long skirt dragging behind her like a shadow. she marched right up to Father Ronaldo during his evening prayers. The few worshippers there sat frozen, uncomfortable, as she stood near the altar and said aloud, "You've been silent too long." She hears the silence. She hears the forgetting. Father Ronaldo tried to calm her, tried to lead her gently back outside, but Dolores pulled something from her pocket. A small black stone, smooth and flat, and held it high. "This is what's left of her hut," she said. "The fire didn't touch it. Nothing burns her memory." She dropped it on the floor, and the sound echoed like a drumbeat, loud and wrong, bouncing off the chapel walls. That night, the wind came earlier than usual. It swept through the village before the moon even rose. Windows slammed shut. Doors creaked. Trees leaned toward the ground like they were trying to hide. And in the center of it all was Señora Dolores, sitting on her porch, rocking slowly. Her candle, as always, burned steadily beside her. But then, she stopped rocking. The next morning, no one saw her come to the market. Children didn't see her watering her herbs or talking to the air. At first, no one thought much of it. Maybe she was sick. Maybe she'd gone to visit someone, though no one could name who. But by mid-morning, curiosity turned to worry. Mateo's mother, brave in her own quiet way, went to check. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again, louder. Still nothing. So she pushed open the door, which creaked slowly like it didn't want to move. Inside, everything looked untouched. Her chair, her jars, the dried flowers hanging from the ceiling. The candles still sat on the porch, wax dripping onto the stone. Still burning, but Dolores was gone. Her bed was untouched. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no broken glass. Just wind, moving through the house like it belonged there, curling around the furniture, rustling the pages of her prayer book. The strange part wasn't that she was gone. It was that there was nothing wrong. No sign of where she went. Just absence. People searched, not with much enthusiasm, truth be told. Most were too afraid to step inside. A few brave souls went into the jungle, calling her name, but their voices sounded strange in the thick air. Like they were swallowed up, like the trees didn't want them there. The priest visited the house later that day. He stood at the threshold, hesitant. His face was pale, and his hand trembled as he reached for the candle. But as soon as he touched it, the flame flickered violently, and a gust of wind blew through the street. It knocked over baskets and rattled window panes. He dropped the candle, stepping back quickly, whispering prayers under his breath. He didn't try again. That night, the wind didn't stop. It blew for hours, never loud, never violent, just constant, like a breath held too long, like a whisper too close. The villagers didn't sleep. They stayed huddled indoors, clutching rosaries, jumping at every creak, and every now and then, someone would hear something faint in the air, a name, a laugh, a single word, Dolores. From that day on, Her house stood empty. No one dared take anything from it. Not the herbs, not the jars, not even the candle, which eventually melted down to nothing. The stone she had dropped in the chapel, still there. No one touched it. Even when someone swept the floor, they'd go around it. No one knew why. It just felt wrong. After Dolores vanished, people began to believe, really believe. They remembered her warnings. She's waiting for her name to be spoken again. They thought of the strange wind, the silence, the smell, and now Dolores, the only one who tried to stop it, was gone. Taken, perhaps, or worse, invited her in. From then on, when the wind blew, no one opened their windows. No one stepped outside. They whispered her name with fear. Not Dolores, the other one, the one whose story should have stayed buried. But now it was breathing again. And deep in the jungle, just beyond the last rows of the village, where the trees grow thicker and the ground turns cold, the wind started to change. It stopped being just wind. It started to sound like footsteps. It started quietly, as most evil things do. Just before the town disappeared, people began noticing strange figures moving at the very edge of the jungle, where the shadows grow thick and tangled and the moonlight refuses to reach. They didn't make a sound, not the crunch of dry leaves, not the snapping of twigs, nothing. They wore long black robes, hooded and heavy despite the stifling heat. Their faces were never visible. Some villagers said the robes moved like smoke instead of cloth, always drifting, never resting. The first to see them was a man named Ramiro. He was out late, trying to fix the motor on his old pickup that had stalled just outside his house. He was cursing under his breath, bathed in the orange glow of a flickering lantern, when something in the corner of his eye caught his attention. Across the road, on the jungle side, stood a row of figures. 3, maybe 4. He couldn't be sure. They didn't move. They just stood there, half shrouded in the branches, watching. At first, he thought maybe it was kids playing a prank, but no one laughed. No one moved. They were too still, too quiet. He called out. Nothing. Then a gust of wind swept through, carrying with it the now familiar scent of dried herbs and wet bones. When he looked back, they were gone. Ramiro tried to shake it off, told himself it was just the light playing tricks. He didn't even mention it to anyone the next morning. But he didn't sleep that night, and neither did his dog, who whined at the door until sunrise, refusing to go near the window. By the next day, more people had seen them. A pair of sisters fetching water from the well said they noticed tall shapes standing between the banana trees. A farmer on his way home spotted 5 of them lined along the ridge, silhouettes against the twilight sky. Each time, the figures never moved, never spoke, just stood and stared. Then came the floating. Some swore they weren't walking at all. They moved without disturbing the grass or the dirt beneath them. One man said he saw their robes trailing behind them, even when the air was completely still, as if pushed by something unseen. Others described their motion like they were underwater. Slow, smooth, too fluid to be natural. No one approached them. No one dared. The town's bravest men, usually bold and full of fire, now walked in pairs, even during the day. At night, they stayed in. Everyone did, and that's when the wind began to change. It had always been strange, whispering, shifting in circles. But now it had weight, intent. At midnight, exactly midnight, it would surge. Not a blast, but a deep, forceful push that rattled shutters and shook trees. The air felt electric, thick with static, as if a storm was about to break, but there were no clouds. And every time it happened, the lights flickered. Street lamps buzzed, then dimmed. Bulbs in homes blinked like eyes trying to stay open. Even the candles, especially the candles, would struggle to stay lit, their flames stretching sideways as if trying to run away. That was when people really started locking their doors. Not that it helped. They locked doors, bolted windows, pushed furniture against entryways. They whispered prayers, lit incense, clutched rosaries. But the wind still came in. It didn't knock. It didn't ask. It seeped. Through cracks in the walls, through the tiniest spaces under doors. It curled under blankets, pressed against the skin, and breathed in your ear. People reported dreams, shared dreams. In them, they stood at their own front doors, unable to move, while the robed figures circled their homes. The wind screamed outside, and in every dream, the same thing happened. One figure would look directly at them, though their faces remained hidden, and raise a pale, slender hand, pointing. And then the wind would rush in. Some woke up screaming. Others just sat silently for hours, rocking back and forth, unable to speak. Children refused to sleep. Mothers took to chanting softly in the night. Fathers who once laughed at ghost stories now carried machetes inside their homes. It didn't matter. The fear had already taken root. Even the animals felt it. Horses refused to stay in the stables, panicking at night until they broke their tethers and ran into the jungle. Chickens stopped laying eggs. The dogs, those who hadn't already gone silent, began digging holes in the yards. Shallow, panicked pits, like they were trying to bury themselves away from something. One night, something changed. 3 villagers, Ismail, Javi, and Rosa, decided to confront the figures. They were desperate, exhausted from fear, convinced that if they could just see what these visitors wanted, maybe they could stop it. Maybe they could make it go away. They armed themselves with flashlights, ropes, and crosses. Their families begged them not to go, but they went anyway. They walked toward the jungle at dusk, toward the place where the figures always appeared. By nightfall, They were gone. No one ever saw them again. But something returned. Their flashlights, still on, were found the next morning, standing upright in a perfect triangle in the center of the village square. The batteries had somehow lasted all night, and each beam of light pointed toward the chapel. Inside the chapel, the wind was already waiting. It circled the pews, fluttered the pages of the Bible on the altar, knocked over candles that hadn't burned out. Father Ronaldo tried to hold a service that morning, but had to stop halfway through. His voice kept catching in his throat. He later confessed that he kept hearing someone humming behind him. Soft, sweet, and terribly familiar. A lullaby he couldn't place, but somehow knew. That same night, every door in the village creaked open at midnight. One by one, slowly, the hinges didn't squeak. They just gave way, as if no longer needed. The wind didn't scream. It entered like a guest who had been invited. It moved quietly, confidently. It no longer needed to pretend. And outside, along the edge of the jungle, the figures stood closer than ever before, almost within the village now. Their black robes shimmered in the moonlight, and in the silence between heartbeats, a whisper passed through the air. She is here. It wasn't spoken. Not exactly. It was simply known, like a memory surfacing all at once. Everyone felt it. She was here, not coming, already arrived. And the village, San Isidro de las Cruces, would not see another dawn, because the wind had never been wind. The visitors had never been strangers, and the forgotten name that no one dared speak had been whispered back into the world again. This time, it had listened. Julian had been driving the supply route to San Isidro de las Cruces for nearly 9 years. Every Thursday, without fail, he would leave before dawn from Valladolid with his old red truck loaded with propane tanks, dried goods, gasoline, and the occasional crate of soft drinks or cigarettes smuggled in for the older men who still pretended to quit. He liked the route. Quiet, no checkpoints, no radio towers. Just that long stretch of unpaved road winding through the dry, whispering jungle. That road knew him, and he knew every bump and bend like an old friend. But that Thursday night was different. It had been a hot day. Julian was late leaving the last village, tired and sticky with sweat. He drove into the evening, the sun long gone behind the trees, the stars barely visible through the mist that had begun to creep in. The air smelled wrong, too clean, like it had been scrubbed of its natural scent. No smoke from the kitchens, no frogs, no insects. Just the rhythmic thrum of his engine, humming against the silence. Then he saw it. Not suddenly, but slowly, as if it was blooming before his eyes. Up ahead, maybe a kilometer down the road, the outline of San Isidro came into view. But it wasn't dark like usual. It was glowing. Not candlelight, not torches, nothing flickering. Just a strange, steady blue. Pale, cold, like moonlight shining from underground. He slowed the truck, leaned forward in his seat, squinting through the dusty windshield. The houses were there, faint outlines bathed in that strange light. The chapel, the market square, even the water tower, all shimmering as if submerged beneath clear water. It wasn't a reflection. There was no water. It was the town itself, breathing with light, alive in a way he couldn't understand. Then he heard the singing. At first, it was beautiful. A woman's voice, soft and slow, floating through the trees like it didn't belong to a human throat. A lullaby, almost familiar. Something that made the hair on Julian's arms stand on end. But not from fear, not yet. It was the kind of voice that makes your heart hurt without knowing why. The kind that digs into old memories you thought you'd buried. He turned off the engine. The silence hit like a wall. The truck ticked and cooled behind him, and he leaned his head out the window. The song was clearer now. The words were wrong, not Spanish, not Mayan, nothing he recognized. But the melody was unmistakably human, or something trying very hard to sound human. Then it changed. The tone dipped, sharpened, the sweetness twisted into something broken. The notes bent in impossible ways, stretching longer than a breath should last. A voice wavered between woman and something else, something deeper, something ancient. Julian felt it crawl into his chest, cold and suffocating, as though his ribs were being pulled apart just to make room for the sound. And then he blacked out. He didn't fall asleep. He didn't feel dizzy. One moment, he was staring at the glowing town and listening to that terrible song. And the next, nothing. Just a hole in his memory, black and bottomless. No dreams, no sense of time passing. Just emptiness. When he woke up, it was morning, bright, cloudless, the sun already rising high and hot. His truck was still there, engine off, key still in the ignition. But the road ahead, gone. No tire tracks, no sign of the village, no shimmer, no structures, no people. Just jungle, wild, overgrown, as if no one had ever driven there before. Trees leaned in where the road had been. Vines curled across the ground like they had never been disturbed. It was as if San Isidro de las Cruces had never existed. Julian got out of the truck, his legs weak, heart pounding. He walked forward, expecting to find the edge of the village or at least a clearing. But it was all dense undergrowth. He kept walking. 10 steps, 20, 50, still jungle, still silence. And then he heard the singing again. Far away, faint, drifting through the trees. The same song, the same voice. Only now it was broken completely, echoing like a cracked bell underwater. He froze. His throat tightened. He didn't know whether to run or listen. The sound felt like it was pulling him in two directions, toward memory and toward madness. He turned around, walked back to the truck, and drove. Not fast, not slow, just steady. Like if he sped up, he'd crash through time itself. Like if he stopped, wind would reach in and take him too. He never returned to the route again. Instead, he told his story once, in a bar just outside Mérida. He drank 3 beers first, then told it to a pair of young men who asked why he'd left his delivery job. He didn't exaggerate. He didn't dramatize. He just told them what happened. When he finished, he didn't ask for them to believe him. He just said, "Don't go looking. If you ever find the town again, it means she's looking for you." The 2 men laughed. One of them tried to find the road. A week later, never came back. The other one moved to Mexico City. Won't talk about it. As for Julian, he disappeared a year after that. Not violently, not mysteriously. He was last seen driving toward the hills one evening. Empty truck bed, clear sky. He never came home. The truck was found abandoned near a dried-up cenote 2 days later. Inside, the only clue was a cassette tape left on the passenger seat. No label, just a soft hum recorded over and over. A voice singing in a language that changed every few seconds. Sometimes it was a lullaby. Sometimes it was laughter. But always, always it ended the same way, with breathing and then silence. Not even the sound of tape hiss, just wind. Today, San Isidro de las Cruces doesn't exist on any map. Not in the dusty atlases sold in backstreet bookstores. Not in the modern satellite scans on digital screens. Not even in the military archives where old paths and settlements are sometimes preserved, like forgotten bones in a drawer. It's been scrubbed clean, not just from paper, but from memory, at least from the memory of those who never knew to remember. There are no ruins to mark the village. No crumbled foundations hiding beneath vines. No broken crosses lying in the grass. No church bell rusting in the dirt. Just a patch of forest that seems wrong. The trees grow taller there, twisted. Their trunks bent slightly inward, like they're bowing toward a center no one can see. The ground is soft, but not with life. It feels spongy, like something beneath it is hollow. And the wind, always the wind, never stops blowing. It doesn't matter if the rest of the jungle is still. The breeze in that one place stirs constantly. It loops and circles like it's trapped, like it's trying to say something but doesn't remember how. Some days it's soft, like breath. Other times it whistles through the branches, like someone calling out from far away. No matter when you go, it always feels like you arrived too late or too soon. Of course, Stories have a way of leaking out. They say a French travel blogger tried to document the site. He was young, confident, all cameras and swagger, chasing hidden places of haunted Mexico. He found the forest. Even uploaded a short teaser clip. It showed nothing but trees and silence. And then him turning suddenly to the side, like he'd heard something behind him. The screen glitched, froze, then cut to black. That was the last anyone heard from him. A team of amateur ghost hunters went next. 4 friends from Mexico City with drone equipment and night vision gear. They were streaming live for a YouTube special, exploring the vanished village, Real Bruja Evidence. The feed dropped after 23 minutes. The last frame was of one of the team members staring upward, mouth open like she was about to scream, but no sound came out. The footage never reappeared. The channel was deleted 2 days later. Only the thumbnail remains, reposted by some conspiracy forums. The girl's face, eyes wide, hair floating slightly as if underwater. Still, the brave or foolish keep trying. Locals don't go near the place anymore. Even those who never believed in the story get nervous when someone asks for directions. They shake their heads, wave you off, say, "There's nothing there." Some get angry. Others just go quiet, staring past you like they're remembering something their grandparents warned them not to forget. Those who do make it back from that part of the jungle don't always speak about what they saw. They return changed, not visibly, not at first, but their voices are softer. Their eyes don't meet yours the way they used to. They stop attending family gatherings. They stop laughing at the same jokes. And sometimes when they think they're alone, on a bus, or standing in line, or sitting beneath a tree, they hum. A tune no one recognizes. But it's always the same one. The same eerie, stretched out melody. Sweet at first, like a lullaby. Then, off. A note that never resolves. A rhythm that skips like a broken clock. The same song Julian heard before the town disappeared forever. Some say it's a curse. Others say it's an invitation. They say the ones who return are marked, not possessed, but remembered. They say the witch doesn't want to be forgotten again. And if someone dares to step too close, if someone stays long enough in that strange, wind-blown clearing, if someone listens too hard to the whispering breeze, then she will remember them. Not their body, their name, their essence, their voice. And once she remembers you, it's only a matter of time. You might be sitting in your apartment in Cancun, or on a bus in Tulum. You might be lying in bed, just about to drift off. When the air suddenly shifts, you'll feel it before you hear it. The change in pressure, the sudden stillness, and then the softest exhale. Too close, too real. Maybe it's your name. Some folklorists now refer to San Isidro as a map without a name, a place that exists outside of geography, a wound in the world that looks like forest but feels like memory. Others say it's a cautionary tale, a symbol of collective guilt, a reminder of what happens when something sacred is desecrated and then ignored. But not everyone agrees. There's one theory, darker than the rest. It suggests that San Isidro never existed in the way we think, that the town itself was never meant to last, that it was a trap, a dream, a seed planted in reality by something that needed to be worshipped, that the people who lived there weren't victims, they were keepers. They were meant to hold her name, to keep her memory alive, and when they forgot, she took them. Because gods, especially the old, wild ones, do not vanish when people stop believing. They just wait. And when the wind finally finds a new voice to carry her name again, when someone speaks it aloud with curiosity or disbelief, when a breath is taken too close to that cursed clearing, she begins to bloom again. Not from the ground, from memory. It's said that the real danger isn't going there. It's remembering it. Because once you know about San Isidro, it knows about you. And if you talk about it too much, like you're doing now, if you tell the story, even in a whisper, the wind may shift around your neck. You may hear something just behind you, faint but clear. The breathing, the humming, the soft murmur of a name not spoken for generations. And maybe, just maybe, she'll remember your name too.